Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Rose Writes and I write and narrate Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction. Shout out to Nema Diana on Instagram for allowing me to use their beautiful artwork. Their info will be linked below, so be sure to show them some love. I hope you enjoy this Valentine's Day story. Without further ado, enjoy the Valentine. Alya, I'm freaking out! Marinette said, biting what little nails she had left. Okay, don't freak just yet. Read me what you have. Alya sat cross-legged on Marinette's bed, holding her friend's cat pillow close against her chest. Marinette took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. She unfolded a piece of notebook paper that had been creased, looking significantly worn. She cleared her throat before glancing at Alya nervously, who urged her to continue. She read the paper verbatim. My dearest Adrien, from the moment you handed me your umbrella, I knew I loved you. I knew one day our souls would find each other and melt into one. The love-stricken teen became invested in her letter, letting it inform her movements. My love for you knows no bound. For you, I would... Alya, having heard enough, interrupted Marinette's declaration of love. No, ma'am. Nope. She snatched it from her friend's clammy hands, examining it, a look of disgust on her face. What? What's wrong with it? Alya hastily rushed down the stairs leading from Marinette's bed to the floor. She gave it another once-over before ripping it down the middle, then throwing it in the trash. Alya, what's wrong? I thought it was good. Marinette pleaded as she chased Alya down the ladder. Marinette, it's just so... How do I put this nicely? It's hella cringy. If she were trying to spare Marinette's feelings, it didn't show. But then again, Alya had been her best friend for a few years, and Alya wouldn't be herself if she weren't brutally honest. Even if sometimes she was a bit too honest. Marinette dove for the small trash bin next to her bed, pulling out her ripped Valentine. She pieced the page together, only further destroying it. Her mouth formed a scowl. Alya held up her hands in defense. Honestly, I don't think it's your best work. Her best friend grabbed stationery from Marinette's desk, thrusting it at her. Try again? Marinette slowly sat as Alya pulled up a chair beside her. Both girls stared pensively at the blank paper as if it might write itself. Marinette rubbed her temples, then began frantically writing. Alya tried to peek, but Marinette covered her note with her forearm. After no longer than a minute, Marinette threw the pen down, slamming her head on the wooden desk. Geez, Marinette, spaz much? Alya pried the now wrinkled paper from under her forehead, reading it carefully. Dear Adrien, it's me, Marinette. I love you more than anything, and I know you may not feel the same way. But I heard you really like Ladybug, which is great news, because I am Ladybug. More was written, but Alya simply shook her head, ripping this one into several unrecognizable pieces. Seriously, Marinette? You absolutely cannot say that. Alya said, even more frustrated than before. No, really? Marinette said with biting sarcasm. She groaned, spinning in a circle in her computer chair. Why is this stuff so complicated? Valentine's Day is stupid anyway. Marinette's head fell onto Alya's shoulder. Her best friend soothed her, stroking her hair, undoing her pigtail, smoothing the ridges the ponytail holders caused. It's getting late. Let's just go to bed. We can brainstorm tomorrow if you'd like. Sure, I guess. I probably won't be any closer to telling him how I feel, but A for effort, I suppose. A defeated and sleepy-eyed Marinette slowly slinked up the ladder to bed, falling asleep in a few seconds of hitting her pillow. Alya stayed wide awake, eyeing the leftover stationery. She picked up one of Marinette's signature pink pens to get a head start on ideas. She wrote late into the night, putting her heart into it, or more like, putting Marinette's heart into it. Before Alya did finally fall asleep, she had hidden the love letter in the pocket of her bag. If Marinette wouldn't take the risk, Alya would take it for her. The girls got ready for school that morning, Valentine's Day. No one mentioned the failed attempts of Marinette's love letter, but likewise, Alya didn't mention that he had written one to give Adrien from Marinette. Walking into the classroom felt like any other day of the week. Different day, same stuff. Chloe trying to push herself onto Adrien, Kulika and Rose being basically the cutest couple ever. Sabrina handing over a week's worth of homework to the Queen of Eternal Darkness. Alya and Marinette were the last two to enter the classroom. Alya spied Adrien's bag lying vacant on the floor next to his seat. An idea began to hatch in her conniving brain. He would pretend to trip and stash Marinette's love note into his bag. While walking to her seat, Alya deliberately tripped on the first step going to her seat, knocking Adrien's bag over, its contents spilling to the floor. "Are you okay, Alya?" Adrien slid out of his seat to help Alya to her feet. Her boyfriend rushed from his seat to check on her as well. "Alya, you good? Being clumsy is usually Marinette's thing." An irritated Marinette protested, "Hey!" Then looked back at her hands placed on her desk, knowing they were correct. "I'm fine. I guess Marinette's clumsiness is contagious." Alya gathered her stuff from the floor, pushing the neatly sealed envelope into Adrien's messenger bag before picking the bag up, straightening it, then putting it next to Adrien's seat. She smirked, pleased with herself. "What are you so happy about? You sure you want to sit here? You might catch the clumsiness," Marinette said sarcastically. She pulled out her iPad containing all of her textbooks from school. "We're in class." Alya poked her side. Through the lecture, Adrien searched for his own book substitute, stumbling on Marinette's letter. Or Alya's letter that she said was from Marinette. He peeled back the envelope, unfolding a piece of stationery decorated with roses, Marinette's favorite flower. And unbeknownst to her, Adrien's too. He sat straight, turning ever so slightly to Marinette. However, she didn't notice. For once, her eyes were fixed on her studies rather than this handsome boy. She made an effort not to look at him. She had failed miserably at writing her feelings, so she didn't even want to look at him. So many times she had gotten close, but something always stood in her way. Usually herself. She didn't look up to see Adrien blushing, but this didn't go unnoticed by Alya. The bell rang and the sounds of students shuffling filled the classroom. Their next period of the day was gym, Marinette's least favorite class. Honestly, Marinette would like gym class. She enjoyed running and she is fast too, but her clumsiness can be disastrous, making her trip over her own 2 feet. Not only does she hurt herself, but others around her. When they played a game, she usually tried to be the first one out. Today's game? Dodgeball. Great. Alya happened to be a great athlete, but she'd rather spend her time on her computer thinking up new headlines for the Ladybug. 1, 2, 3, begin! Balls whirled past, students being sent out of the game one by one. Grumbles and cheers broke out from the teams as more players left the game. Only a few players occupied both teams, and somehow Marinette was one of them. Marinette and Alya were on a team together, and their opponents were Adrien and Nino. Marinette and Alya were on a team together, and their opponents were Adrien and Nino. Marinette looked around for a ball, grabbing one. She reared her arm back, preparing to strike, when she came face to face with her handsome blonde crush. In a moment of hesitation, she froze, not able to release the ball. He held a similar pose. "Come on, Marinette!" Alya screamed, but nothing happened. In unison, Alya and Nino grabbed a dodgeball, striking their respective opponents. Marinette groaned, having been struck by Nino. She threw the ball to the floor, heading to the locker room in a huff. Adrien followed behind her as Alya and Nino battled it out on the court. Why did she even care? Marinette had never cared about winning at a sport, so why now? Why did she feel so angry? and also sad. "Marinette?" He called after her, but she didn't turn, letting the swinging door close behind her. She heard her name, but she traipsed to her locker. In her annoyance, she struggled with the lock, eventually slamming her fists against the metal. Adrien cautiously opened the door, seeing Marinette with her head leaning against the wall of lockers. He silently approached, then tapped her gently on the shoulder. She jumped a hand over her heart. "Geez, Adrien, you scared me." She slowly turned, giving her locker one last half-hearted punch. "Why are you upset? I mean, it's just a game, right?" he offered, attempting to make her feel better. She crossed her arms, turning away from him. "It's not the game. It's just, I don't know." He walked up to her, placing his arm around her. The hug startled her at first, but finally she melted into his arms, succumbing to this warm and welcoming feeling. She nuzzled her head into his chest, close enough to feel his heart beat against her. Everything felt perfect. She wanted to live in his embrace forever. "I got your letter, Marinette," he whispered. Still holding him, she looked up to examine his handsome face. Was he joking? Mocking her? "What letter?" she replied carefully. "You know, the Valentine on the Rose stationery." Her eyes widened, shocked. Rose stationery. That was definitely hers, but every letter she tried to write, Alya had ripped up and thrown in the trash. "Right," she said, still confused. "A letter? No way, Alya wouldn't do that." Marinette thought for a split second before deciding that, yes, Alya absolutely would do that. "Can I see it?" Adrien hesitantly handed her a folded-up letter from his gym shorts, slightly wrinkled from being jostled by the running. Her eyes skimmed over it as if she had read this letter before. A poem. By Edgar Allan Poe? She smiled. Edgar Allan Poe was her favorite poet, mixing dark and macabre subjects in a beautiful light. Alya had changed a few words of his poem, Annabel Lee, to make it fit them perfectly. Adrien mouthed the words as her eyes scanned the paper. "Our love could be stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from your soul." Marinette's eyes slowly met his as she folded the paper once more, handing it to him. "Sorry," he said, clearly embarrassed. "I've read it a dozen times since I found it in my bag. I'm honestly impressed how you got it in my bag without me noticing. You're usually so klutzy." He chuckled at her expense. She narrowed her eyes. Geez, would everyone just lay off her today? She was a klutz. Everyone made it exceedingly clear. It figures she would do something like this. As much as it pained her, she had to tell the truth. She didn't write this. He had to know, and then if they started anything, it wouldn't be for the wrong reasons. He cocked his head to the side. "She?" he echoed. "She who?" Marinette breathed in, teeth grinding together. "Alya. She wrote this, I didn't." Her crush's eyes fell, darkening. Adrien reread the letter one more time. "Oh, you didn't write this. I thought that you might actually... But I see." He turned to leave, but Marinette tugged on the back of his shirt, begging him to stay. "Please, Adrien, I'm sorry. It wasn't a joke or a prank or anything. I really like you," she blurted out. Adrien stopped his tracks back to her. She still desperately clung to his t-shirt, slowly releasing it only when she was certain he wasn't leaving. He still wouldn't face her. "I never asked her to write it. I tried to write something, but it never turned out quite right. He slowly turned, still not meeting her eyes. How did she know I liked poetry? She didn't, I guess. I love poetry, though, especially Edgar Allan Poe, E.E. Cummings. You do? I never knew that. Why didn't I know that? She shrugged. I don't know. I've always loved poetry. I've just never been able to talk to you before. Now! Marinette grabbed his hands. Adrien stumbled forward, nearly knocking into her. I'm talking to you now, right? I'm not stuttering. Adrien shook his head, processing an insane amount of information. So, you like me? He asked. Marinette's face went from its usual pale complexion to a bright red in 2 seconds. She crossed her arms, avoiding his eyes. She desperately tried to gain composure. Well, do you like me? Marinette shyly met his eyes, flipping the script on him. His beautiful emerald eyes that she had longed to stare into for so long. Adrien took her hands in his, staring back at her intensely. Her natural instinct would have been to pull away, but she stayed, not moving an inch. She couldn't speak. She couldn't think. Her eyes were glued to him as he smiled genuinely at her. Marinette couldn't quite describe this feeling, but she knew it was the best feeling in the entire world. Just being close to him felt like a dream. I'd say, he started, his voice low. I do like you. A lot, actually. Adrien's crooked smile melted her insides. She giggled at his slight embarrassment. So cute. I like you too. A lot, actually. Marinette said coyly, mimicking him. He wrapped her arms around him, the fragrance of his Adrien cologne enveloping her. So he wears his own cologne. She chuckled to herself at the thought. She had this scent covering her pillow, so she knew it all too well. Marinette inhaled deeply, taking in this moment, only opening her eyes when Adrien pulled back. Their classmates poured into the locker room, chattering loudly. Marinette, he whispered, would you be my Valentine? She leaped forward, ignoring the eyes of their curious peers. I thought you'd never ask. She placed a peck on his cheek. She immediately let go as several people now surrounded them, making kissy sounds. So immature. Maybe I should have Alya meddle in my life more often. Marinette giggled as her best friend passed by them to reach her locker, giving Marinette a not-so-subtle thumbs up. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, looking up at him. She had never noticed quite how tall he was as he now seemed to loom over her. He hugged her tightly as the bell rang. We better get going. We don't want to be late for physics. But, after school, I don't have fencing practice. Would you maybe want to get ice cream? From Andre's? Her voice squeaked, eyes widening. Andre was the Parisian sweetheart ice cream maker. Legend says that if any two people eat from the same ice cream, they will be in love forever. While Marinette wasn't sure if she believed in the old superstition, any excuse to get ice cream with Adrien was a good one. He smiled at her, looping an arm through hers. Is there any other kind? He joked. Adrien escorted her to class, even walking her to her seat. Marinette stared at the back of his beautiful blonde head, enjoying the view. For so long, Marinette had pined after Adrien day after day. All it took was one simple Valentine, preceded by many failed attempts, and a little bit of poetry to create the perfect love story. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fan fiction. As always, stay miraculous!